Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are so glad that you've chosen to join us here on today's show. Got a great show for you today. But first of all, I'm going to tell you about the Nitro Bass Boat giveaway. If you want to win a 2022 Nitro Bass Boat fully loaded, go to chriswells.org and you can get your ticket. The drawing is December 17th, and we are going to be giving away. This will be the fifth boat that we've given away. It supports the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast and all that we do with the Bass Chaplain Fishing Ministries and Well-Spoken Ministries. www.chriswells.org to get yours. Now, today I have as my guest someone who has had more indirect and more direct influence on my ministry than anybody that I really know about. This guy is a great guy. He's a former Clemson football player. He is a bass pro. He's fished Bassmaster. He's fished FLW. He has fished Major League Fishing. And he is also the executive director of Sportsman's Outreach. This guy knows about wild game banquets and reaching men for Christ. Glenn Chappelear is going to be my guest today, right here on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. I have as my guest today, I guess you call him the executive director of Sportsman's Outreach, Glenn Chappelear. Welcome,
That's
Glenn.
right.
I'm glad you're here.
Hey, glad to be here, Chris. Thank you a lot.
Man, it's cool to be an executive director. I tell you, that sounds big time right there. So
It doesn't pay a whole lot, but it sounds good.
You know, I tell people I have a great job as long as you don't like money. That's my big deal. So when I did the intro for you, I told everybody that you have indirectly and directly probably affected my ministry as much as anyone out there. Indirectly, I was at Southwestern and I was hanging out with your old college roommate, Kent Williams. And Kent got me a job that you got Kent. And so that's where I first heard your name. And then you started, I think you and I met in Nashville, where Kent was doing a conference where Rick Warren's youth pastor, Doug Fields, was coming in. And I met you and we started talking about fishing. And I believe we skipped out on the entire rest of the conference and talked about bass fishing. You remember
that? Yes.
That was good. I was like, we're going to miss a conference. You said, man, we'll just buy the tapes. And so that's what we did. So that was spent the whole time. But yeah, you've had a big influence on me just with wild game banquets. The first time I ever heard the term sportsman's banquet or wild game banquet, you brought it up to me. You said, hey, you guys need to do a sportsman's banquet. And I was like, what in the world is a sportsman's banquet? And, but you've done literally, I mean, I don't know how many you've done. I mean, how many sportsman's banquets you think you've done over the years?
Well, Chris, we started doing them in 1994. So, is that almost 30 years?
Wow. Yeah. So, God, has it been that long? Man.
Hundreds and hundreds of banquets. Yeah.
That is wild. That is unbelievable. Well, tell us a little bit about now. You've fished Bassmaster, you fished FLW, you fished Major League Fishing, and man, you've done so much. But let's start. How did you get into the professional bass fishing world? What was your journey like getting there?
You know, Chris, that's a great question. And I get that question a lot because younger anglers, high school anglers are trying to, how do you break into the sport? My dad's only got so much money he can invest in me for the next couple of years, or my grandfather. So Chris, is very unique how I started out. I'd always grown up fishing with my father on Lake Hartwell, Lake Greenwood, Clarks Hill Reservoir, Russell Reservoir, and we always had a family boat. And it was probably 1992, I participated in my first tournament, and I won the tournament. It was a small tournament put on by our church, and I didn't catch a single fish. And my cousin teased me and said, well, you didn't catch a fish. I said, it was a team tournament. I was the net man.
That's right. Yeah. The net man. I've been the net man lots of times.
Moved to Georgia in 91 and was needing a boat because I'd moved away from the family boat. And so I bought my first Ranger boat then and started hanging out at the local dealership, Tom's Sporting Goods. And I was single at the time. And on my days off or when I had lunch break, I'd go down to the dealership And for me as a youth minister, it was a very good place to hang out with people that didn't go to church.
Yeah.
And so I just started serving down there, same thing I did as a student minister. And I intentionally did things that helped the dealership that people were not willing to do. And that's how I got my start. And so that meant hanging up the Zoom baits when the rep would come in and have a big order. That meant washing boats, taking boats to the boat show, taking boats home from the boat show, which is what nobody wants to do on Sunday afternoon. And so the dealer told me then, he said, Glenn, I can't pay you, but I can help you get a boat sponsorship. And so that's how I did it. It wasn't with an impeccable resume or I'd won these many tournaments or I'd done these many appearances. I started it by serving.
You know, that's a great point to all of the kids that are out there that are trying to be pro. They think they got to, build your social media, got to win a bunch of tournaments and stuff. You started by, hey, I'm going to serve a dealership. You started by servanthood, and that is awesome. And you know what? You've continued that throughout your entire ministry and throughout your entire career. We're going to get into that in just a minute. But so you started fishing. Now, where did you start fishing professionally? Do you remember your first professional tournament, or you remember when you broke into that?
Man, I was such a lost goose. We fished the first Bassmasters event, 1997, on Lake the Thousand Islands in New York. I had never caught a smallmouth. I had never been in a lake where I couldn't see the bank. I had never been on a lake that had 8-foot waves, and I was lost to say the least. And that was my first event, September 1997.
Yeah, I tell you, it's a lot to learn. People don't realize how much it is. When you're, I never thought I'd see a smallmouth, and I caught my first smallmouth at a Fishers of Men tournament in Kentucky, and I had it mounted. It was 3 pounds mounted, wow. And it's like, I probably caught 100 since then, but I didn't think I'd ever see one again. So yeah, that is tough when you go into a new place and a new deal. I know that had to be a tough deal, but so one of the things that you've done the best of anybody ever seen it is you brought that servanthood mentality to a ministry where you minister. Not only are you participating as a bass pro, but you're ministering to bass pros. And just tell us a little bit about how that went and what are some of the things that you do to reach out to to bass pros when you're out there competing against those guys.
Well, you asked me about 3 questions right there. I'll answer it this way. So I always enjoyed the outdoors and being competitive. I didn't matter if I was playing checkers or ping pong. I wanted to win. And so bass fishing was extremely popular in the 90s. And I had done well in local tournaments in Georgia. And I just asked my Ranger rep, Randy Link at the time, hey, what's the next step? What's the next level? And in 1996, he offered me a sponsorship with Ranger Boats. What was interesting is we had done 3 years of wild game banquets, and he had seen the crowds that were coming, and nobody was hardly doing this back in the day.
Right.
And so that was my real stepping off point, realizing God was working in the outdoor industry, and he was calling me to join him in his work. And so what I did is I reached out to the Southern Baptist Mission Board, told them what I wanted to do. They said, Glenn, it's a great idea. You're something new. And the theme for 1997 was start something new. So I was new. Nobody was willing to pay me, but I felt like God was calling me. The verse of scripture I held on to was Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, where the Bible says Daniel purposed in his heart. And I knew this was of the Lord. I didn't know how it all work out, but God had my heart. And he's in charge of the details, not me. And so we resigned from an incredible youth ministry position where I'd been a youth minister for almost 9 years and started our ministry. And so initially it started out as doing wild game banquets, sportsman's banquets, helping churches reach outdoorsmen. And so I taught at several seminars, church conferences. A lot of the churches that are located around major reservoirs realizing, hey, man, we're not winning. You on Sunday morning, you drive by the boat ramp, it's full of boats. And how can we reach these guys? And so that was my first step, was helping churches create an outdoor event for Bubba, is what I called it. Right. And so that was the main thing I did when I first started. And then to the anglers, I just began to build relationships because we are all competing, but with the 200 boat field, you've got lots of people, lots of life struggles, finances, family, health. And when they know that you're a Christian, you care about them, they're going to come to you. And so we started continuing the Focus meeting, Fellowship of Christian Angler Society, which Jimmy Houston started back in the day.
Right.
And basically that's our Bible study for the anglers on tour.
Right. Yeah. Now, one of the things that you guys did, you started a thing called Meet the Pros. I mean, that's been wildly popular. I know lots of trails, we do it sometimes on the Elite Series but you started out like you'd bring a group of pros in and just have a meeting at a local church. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's sort of funny how that started because back in the day of FLW, when Chevrolet was a sponsor, they had a Chevy Meet the Pros night. And Chevrolet had a team of anglers and the who's who, David Fritz and Jimmy Houston, and Larry Nixon, and they would go to a dealership and in the tournament town and come by and sign autographs. And they'd have, okay crowds. So the Lord just impressed upon my heart to start Meet the Pros night, but doing it at a local church. Well, it got so big, I was teasing the tournament director, Bill Taylor. I said, "Hey, Bill, do you want me to come run your Chevy Meet the Pros night? Because my crowds are bigger than yours." So
that's awesome. Wow.
We just played off the event because the town knew we were there, and it really helped that local church when we would come in and bring our trucks and boats, and the community would have access to the anglers when they were not in a hurry, and they could hear their story and get to meet them and get pictures. And so it was a tremendous outreach event, community outreach event at all the tournament locations. And it's still going on to this day. Blake Smith's running it now.
Yeah. Captain Blake Smith running those things. That's good. That's a great deal. Well, so you guys saw a lot of people saved at those events. There's a lot of people that make decisions. A lot of men that would never darken the doors of a church will come to like a Meet the Pros event. And so it's a great outreach deal. And one of the things we did one of the first game banquets down in Sumter, South Carolina. I was a youth pastor, and you came down with the first speaker that we ever had. And it was just a huge success, and just went from there. It just grew and grew and grew. It was awesome. So that's, your message. You're a great speaker, and your message is that everybody needs a relationship with Christ. Well, tell us a little bit about how you came to know the Lord.
Grew up at a Christian home. Parents had me in church every Sunday, and it was probably, I think, June 1976 is when I gave my life to Christ. I was 13 years of age, and the church was Welcome Baptist Church in Greenville, South Carolina. Steve Rutledge was the pastor, so I remember the date, and who was there. And it was like God's hand was on my heart, just drawing me to be saved. I was sitting on the fourth row from the back with the rest of the teenagers. And that Sunday, I wasn't goofing off and talking. I was really listening. And that was when I gave my life to Christ and began following Christ.
So, the Lord, the Bible says that the Spirit of God draws us, and we come down, you repented of your sins and trusted Christ. And then he started this whole deal and took a passion that you had in your life and turned it into a whole ministry and a whole life of doing this. But, you started off in college. You were a college football player. Let's talk about that, man. You played at Lees-McRae and then went over to Clemson University. Tell us a little bit about playing football.
Very unique story. And at the time, didn't totally understand it. I just knew I'd broken my ankle my senior year in high school at the second scrimmage. And I'd been preparing for that season. This would be 1979. And I just felt like there was more to it. And I just didn't want to end my career that way. And we had a good season, made to the semifinals, upper state championship is what we called it back in the day.
Right.
And I felt like God had more for me. And so I went to Lees-McRae, but they don't have a football team anymore now. And that was a great experience. And my goal was to eventually play at Clemson. Now, I was not a 5-star athlete, 4-star, 3-star. I might have been a 1-star athlete. Of course, we didn't have that back then either. We just had blue chip athletes. And so I walked on at Clemson, and it wasn't until later in life that I really understood what it meant to be a walk-on, because you're going to be scout team for a long time, may not get your name on your jersey till your senior year. and you may not get very much playing time. But I knew in my heart I wanted to do that, and also that was the time when the Fellowship of Christian Athletes was really popular at Clemson, and had the privilege of being the president my senior year. And really, that was the big launching point for me to go into full-time ministry. We had a great team of people called into ministry during that era, that 1983, 84, 85 years. God was really moving on our campus. And many of those men I'm referring to are still in full-time ministry today.
I can't imagine. I mean, I can't believe how many on that national championship team, and then you guys came in, how many guys off that team went into ministry. It was amazing. I mean, I think about, Carl Martin and Vandale Arrington and, all those, Jeff Davis, all those guys, all in ministry. And it was a pretty special deal. And Clemson seems to have, really have its act together as far as, hiring those kind of men that come in, with Coach Sweeney, just makes no bones about it, loves the Lord, and, just puts it out there. And that's awesome. I bet that was an awesome experience.
Here's something real interesting. I was speaking at Rome High School in Rome, Georgia last week at the FCA Northwest Georgia football camp. And Clemson had just got a commitment from a defensive end from Rome, and he's massive. He's on my Facebook page. We took a picture together, and I just had 30 seconds to talk to him. And I said, "Hey man, why did you pick Clemson? You could have gone anywhere." He said to me, and I don't know this young man, I just met him that day at the high school. He said, "I just feel like it's family." And so
Wow.
those guys know what they're doing. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's it. My son had a full scholarship to the University of South Carolina. I don't think I've ever told the story. And he went to the meeting, and then some little girl invited him to Clemson on Saturday. And on Sunday after church, he announced to the family, "I'm a Tiger," which didn't sit well for my youngest son. Didn't speak to him for about 2 weeks, but he finally did. He said, "I forgive you, but you're going to stand before God and answer for going to Clemson." But he had I think Clemson won 2 national championships while he was there. And blessedly for us, he graduated early, so we didn't have to hear it so bad, because we're all Gamecock fans. But man, that's awesome. Coach Sweeney's got it going on there, and just a whole lot of different ways. Now let's switch gears. College fishing is huge, and I know Clemson's got a college fishing team, and I know all these schools, but there are a lot of young anglers coming up, and you have seen so many changes in your career. I mean, it's amazing how many things, I think about, between power poles, fluorocarbon line, just the live target and all the things going on. What are some things that you would give like a young angler that they might not be getting off the internet or whatever that they can be doing in order to be a better fisherman? What would you say to them?
Probably in my 25-year career, the top 5 game changers were, of course, higher performance boats, being able to use larger motors. You can go further. Power pole was a game changer when that began. And then the whole fluorocarbon line, all those things. And now it's honestly electronics, and you can't even read the manual and understand the equipment. You almost have to get electronics course. Yeah. And that'd probably be my number one thing, reading electronics, because lakes are so pressured now, and you got to get offshore, find stuff that's not as visible and not fish the bank. So probably that'd be the main thing that you would keep. And the other thing is the mental side of your fishing. I was sort of a middle of the pack fisherman. I'd had some good tournaments, some average tournaments, and some bad tournaments. And it seemed like the guys that were always the top 5 anglers, and you could name all of them right now, they just had that mental edge, mental game. We're never afraid to change up. And that's something, and they didn't spin out mentally. Like when your pattern falls apart at 10 o'clock in the morning, you don't spin out and lose the whole day. And being able to overcome that, it's funny. I had a friend, Lonnie O'Neill from Valdosta, Georgia. He said this to me. He said, "Glenn, if you're going to fish, you got to have 2 things right." I said, "What's that, Lonnie?" He said, "You got to have your women right." I said, "Okay." I guess it means your marriage.
Right.
Things, you got to have things good at home.
Right.
And then you got to have your money right. And if any of those 2 are wrong, you're not going to be able to concentrate. You're not going to be able to compete, and you'll be worried about stuff at home, worried about your finances. So The other thing, I see this a lot. Most anglers last about 3 years. It's almost like an NFL player. Do finances or life changes or career changes. And so setting a goal and knowing, okay, I'm going to stay in it till I can't do A, B, or C, whatever that is. It could be till I run out of money, or I run up $50,000 on my credit card, or I'm missing too much of life chasing this.
Right. That's good stuff right there. I tell you, along with that first tip that, that you gave to guys about being a servant, that's golden right there. That's great stuff that, you can have. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to take you back, a few years. I was fishing in an Everstart tournament one time on Santee, and I was fishing as a non-boater. I'm in the back of the boat, and you had a tournament where you zeroed the first day.
Oh yeah.
And then on the second day, I walked up to you and said, how'd it go? And you just opened up your tournament bag and you caught 5 that weighed 29 pounds on the second day and made the cut. That was amazing. Tell us about that day.
I'll give you the backstory of that. So that was an Everstart event. I love Santee, Cooper. Oh, I love that place in the month of March or April. And the weather conditions didn't set up right the first day, but I also felt like there were some things in my life I was not honoring the Lord by faith. And I felt like the Lord was disciplining me and allowed me to zero that first day. And man, it was just a weight of the world. I felt like a failure. And I just asked the Lord to forgive me, to restore me, and for him to accomplish his purpose in my life. And that, along with a warm front coming in, turned those fish on with a spinnerbait. And man, it was crazy. Came to the weigh-in, 29.3 was the total weight. And that's back in the day when a 30-pound bag, it was very rare. And usually that only happened at Okeechobee. Yeah. Now they're more common now because of different fishing techniques, but that was a top 5 stringer in FLW back in the day.
That was amazing. I remember that like it was yesterday. That was a wild day. That was a great deal. Man, that is so awesome. Tell us a little bit about, now you do some other things as well in your ministry. You're also, you do a lot with police officers, and I've seen I get your newsletter, and how did the police officer thing come around, and what a great ministry. Wow.
Well, to explain that just a little bit, I have adult ADD. Well, I probably had it all my life. I get bored easily, and I'll be 60 in August. And so I'm just not satisfied with, just going to church, and I want more. And so in 2005, a police officer in my church asked me to consider being a chaplain for the Cobb County Police Department. And I was like, what is that? I'd heard a baseball chaplain or football chaplain. And so went through a background check, interview process. So as a chaplain, I ride along with officers, attend meetings, briefings. I love to cook, so I cook for officers. I'll go cook for the SWAT team, narcotics unit, K9 unit, because it's a lot of ministry of your presence. You're visible, you're there. So when a crisis comes up, and not necessarily like a police crisis, but a family crisis in their community, with a child or a sickness or whatever, then they're like, hey, I know that chaplain guy. And so that's one way that I minister. And I know at Anderson County, South Carolina, when I'm in town, I usually go serve all the deputies at the jail. I'll take them good barbecue Boston butt, mac and cheese, fried chicken lunch, and just hang out with them a little bit. And so again, just a ministry of my presence.
Man, that's awesome. In a world where people are yelling about defunding the police and stuff, I know police officers are really catching it right now, and they're really, feeling low. And that's awesome. I know that's got to be a great ministry to their families. I want to get that Boston butt recipe from you too, because I need to do that. I bet I've seen your spread on that. Glenn, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, maybe to do a wild game banquet or to come preach at your church or to put together a ministry event, how can they get a hold of you?
I'm all over Facebook through sportsmanoutreach.org. You could, of course, call me. Chris will have my number in the show notes, or email me. Any of those ways, Facebook Messenger, are all great ways to communicate with me.
And you go all over the country. Anywhere you're not going to go?
That's no, we've gone everywhere.
You're going all over the place. So wherever you are, folks, if you need a great speaker, or if you need a guy to teach your church how to do men's ministry and to reach guys that nobody else are reaching, you need to give Glenn Chappelear a call. Follow him on Facebook, follow him on Instagram, and keep up with Sportsman Outreach. Glenn, I want to thank you for being here with me today, man. It's been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me.
All right, Chris, here, I'm going to give you my rapid fire.
Yeah. Oh, I almost forgot. You got to do, you got to do an impression. You got to do the impression.
No,
you're not going to do an impression for us.
I'm going to do rapid fire. Okay. Here's top 5 things. Okay.
All right, go.
Top 5 things in my life recently. Best book I've read. It's called Gun Lap. If you're over 55, you need to read it. Talks
Gun Lap. Okay.
Yep, the last lap of your life. Person that motivates me the most is following Jesus Christ. And then verse that is most meaningful to me is 2 Timothy 2:21. Be a vessel useful to the master. And that verse really motivates me to accomplish God's purpose in my life with the limited time I have left on this earth.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. That's a good deal. We're not going to make you do an impersonation of another angler. And so we've had a lot of good ones, but we're going to not do that. But man, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Awesome.
Thank you, Chris. God bless you.
All right, everybody. That is the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. If you hadn't hit the subscribe button, asked you hit that red subscribe button, or wherever it is you get your podcast from, hit our subscription, write us a review, and we'll see you next time on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast.